thank you all for taking time out of your nights. I know it's very difficult to get out in the evenings, especially during dinner time. Our hope was that if we schedule this meeting before the board meeting, that if people can't make it to this part of the session, they certainly would be welcome to come to the public board meeting as well. My plan is to speak to, I don't want to do a presentation. I'm assuming people here have a pretty good sense of the project and what's anticipated. So I don't want to take up time giving a presentation if everybody knows. Is there anyone who feels that if they want sort of the video, a 5-minute rundown, or are people feeling pretty aware of what's included in the project? We're all good? Okay.
And there's some information outside or right here if you want to look at it while we're talking or while someone else is asking questions. This is the brochure that came home in the mail. All of you should have it by now. And then these were the Q&A questions that are online. There's more stuff online as well, but we felt that these were the most significant documents that we put out so far.
So my name is Jeremy Luft. I'm the Deputy Superintendent here. I'm going to ask a couple of my colleagues to introduce themselves. I'll answer whatever questions I can, but certainly I have other people with expertise in areas other than my own, and I would ask them to jump in and answer a question if they're the correct person for that.
All right, so I'm Jill Figuerella. I'm the treasurer for the school district. And Brian?
Hi, Brian Burrow, Director of Physical Education, Athletics, and Health.
I'm Dave Spittle, I'm the Director of the Facilities and Transportation.
Please don't ask me questions. Please don't ask me.
And I'd also like to make sure you know Jeannie tonight, who's done a lot of work for us in communications, and really has been a great liaison for the project getting all of everybody.
Thank you. Welcome. We're just getting started. We just did some quick intros. All right. So without further ado, our point here is to make ourselves available to answer any questions that may be out in the community. So I'll open it up to the floor. And I just ask that everyone be respectful of whoever's asking the question. Give us a chance to answer it, and then we'll get to the next person. We'll do our best to spread it out so everyone gets a chance to ask questions, and then see how this goes. Anyone want to start?
Yeah, I just was talking with my wife. I mean, she applauded the fact that this went out in the mail. The big, I think, question that she had is numbers are there, information, but this difference, I'll call it delta T, the difference between the 14.8 million that's shown there and the it's called 5.8 million in funds there. She said, how is that made up? I mean, that will probably explain a lot to her,
right,
and probably a lot of the citizens. And I tried to explain it. I said, you know what? In fact, finding mission for me as a husband and trying to get that information out. So again, that was probably.
So the question was really around, there's been a couple different numbers out in the community regarding state aid, and there's a couple different reasons for that. The first piece was, at first we were using a number 4.8 and 5.2. Now, the first number is based upon the amount of aid we would collect back based upon the principal of the loan. So if you buy a $300,000 house, you would pay X amount of interest. I mean, it would be the aid you would get back on simply the price of the house. The larger number is the amount of aid we would get back when figuring in the interest that would be paid on that loan. So both numbers are accurate. In fact, both numbers are a little larger. They went up to 5.2 because the principal of the loan had increased at one point from 14.2 million to 14.8 million. So because the principal part of the loan went up, all of those numbers raised a little bit, but both numbers are accurate. We want to be as transparent as possible so people understand if I only use the larger number, that's inaccurate if people are only considering the principal cost. And if I only use the lower number, it's inaccurate if people are considering the interest on top of the principal cost. So we put both numbers out there, so in hoping that people understood the difference between one's the total amount we get back when considering interest paid, the other is just the amount of aid we expect to get back based upon the principal cost. I also want to point out, and I should have said this in the beginning, Dan Mahoney is our district videographer. He's filming this whole thing, so although we can't stream it live right now, everything will be posted, this whole meeting will be posted afterwards for the community to see. I know there was a request for that along the way.
What is the interest rate you're expecting on the bond?
So the terms of the loan are not determined yet. The way it works is once we receive voter approval, or if we receive voter approval, there's, and Jill can speak more to this, there's actually a service out there that shops around the loan we want to different banks and finds us the best interest rate. The best analogy I could give would be when you go to purchase a home and you go to a mortgage broker. A mortgage broker will look at many different banks and find the best mortgage, the lowest interest rate that they can find. Similar in our case, we would go to a service, financial advisors, who would shop around our bond and find the best rates.
Right, at the time the bond, whatever the bond market is, those fiscal advisors will put it out to bid. That's what we have to do when we go out for a bond. And at that time, they'll get us the best rate. It could be a fixed rate, it could be an escalated rate, you know, start lower, go higher, start higher, go lower, depending on what's available and how they feel the economy is at the time. Those rates are figured into what we were talking about earlier too, in the, as far as the cost goes, so those are right now estimates, obviously.
Another question? Yes?
What happens if the state doesn't
Oh.
give us the aid we expect?
Did me at his words, then I'll go right back to you, all right? Go ahead.
It's okay.
Oh, you want to go? All right, so the question about state aid. The financial advisors and the architects who put together all of the numbers, they figure out what they think is the worst case scenario, the least amount of aid we can get back based upon our project, based upon hundreds of other projects of which they've done. So all of our aid numbers are based upon what they think is the lowest amount we will get. So our hope is that number could go up, but that number is based upon their expertise and what they think the project will get back from the state on the low end, right? They're building in as much cushion as possible, but for the project that costs less, but the project cannot cost more. And as we've talked about on many occasions, we can't go over that 14.8, so they're starting lower.
What happens if it comes in lower?
We don't expect it to come in lower.
I understand that, but what happens if it comes in lower? How does that
Then we
impact
would have to
it?
reduce costs.
And what would be the priority order for the projects then?
That would be determined at the time based upon.
And would the community get a chance to have a say in what those priorities are?
Well, I mean, I don't know if we would survey the community. I think this happens once the project begins. There's a construction manager who we have weekly meetings. It involves the architects, the construction managers, the general contractors. Everyone else is involved, and I think that group would have a sense of the costs, and they would make decisions on. Sometimes it's something as simple as finishings.
Usually in projects like this, once you get to the actual pricing of the project, there are alternates. In other words, what you find in these projects, I've been involved in a number of them, is that you have to come up with this estimate for the public. But then when you actually have the input, you have the figures, then you develop alternates, because some of the things in this project may come in too high. And so then we have to reduce, and you then develop alternates. So if something comes in lower, then you have an opportunity to go to an alternate. That's how in projects that I've been involved in other projects, that's how we've done that. And that's what usually happens.
And also, I've been involved in currently public works projects. There are add alternates, there are add deduct alternates as well for the projects. I mean, it's think of it as a potpourri of, of items that can be selected. You want the most, how can I say it? You want the most,
Well, you want the most for your money.
right,
but-
the biggest bang for your buck. I mean, that's the thing. We
Yeah.
have buildings here that do need work, and assume that that's what things are going to be focused upon.
Yeah, when they send things out to bid, they'll bid on different parts. So, say for instance, they're focusing on the windows. There'll be all different options at that point in time as to and how it fits into the budget. And you can have alternate options even on the window bid, and say, well, we're going to save 50,000 here and we need it over there, so we're not going to do this part of the windows or whatever. So you just have to. That develops as the process goes on. It's not something that we can foresee at the moment, but we know pretty much around what the costs are going to be for each thing.
Good
What
question.
happens if the bond doesn't pass? What's going to happen to the capital improvements to the buildings that are priority? I mean, how are you guys, what's priority and what's secondary? I heard the cafeteria in the middle school doesn't work at all. Like,
No.
how could the district let that, like, that's absurd to me.
Right. Well, that's not the case. It's not that the cafeteria doesn't work at all. It's that they don't. Middle school students are not afforded the same variety and options that students are here because they simply have less equipment. It's a really small kitchen. There's not a lot of space in there, so they're very limited in terms of what they can cook and heat up over there. So an expansion of that would allow us to increase our what we can offer students. The other issue over there is that the size is you can't accommodate a whole grade at once. So we eat like A through L, well M through Z goes to recess, and then they swap. So a new larger space would accommodate that.
So the equipment does work and they do cook over there, is that correct?
Some of the food they cook, mostly they have is ovens, so they can heat up pre-made materials, but not necessarily, they don't have like stoves, so they couldn't make soup or other things like that.
Did it ever have that?
No.
I went here, so I don't know. I'm asking. That's what's out in the community that the,
Right.
That's a good question.
No, and we have upgraded the facility over there as much as possible throughout the years, and we've replaced things and, you know, put in pieces of equipment. But for instance, and I know this is a big deal at the high school, is the panini makers and how much, you know, the kids are, you know, love the paninis. We can't even make them over there. We don't have the, we don't have the exhaust fans, we don't have the electrical outlets that we need. We can hook them, they would have to be out in the cafeteria where the kids sit. It's an unsafe situation to have panini makers there. It's something we'd like to have over there. They're very costly to put in and to house in a safe manner. So that's another example of it. There's other things as well.
So back to the original question, if it doesn't pass, how do, like, the capital improvements, like the windows I heard need replacing, what's going to happen with
Sure.
that?
So I think the first thing that would happen is we would reconvene the facilities planning committee. So that was a committee of almost 40 community members and district staff to get together and decide what are our options moving forward. There is a potential of having a second vote in the spring if that's something that the committee decided to move forward with. But in terms of infrastructure upgrades, there's certain things that you're correct that need to be done. But we would have to figure out how to do that. The problem is in years past, and we have a 5-year plan that sort of tracks. So Dave could tell you the middle school windows were set to be replaced 4 years ago. I'll make up a number. But the problem is 4 years ago, with the tax cap, we don't have over $1 million to take out of our general operating budget to replace windows. So we're stuck with a choice that any homeowner is stuck with. You need a new roof, and you don't have any money to pay for it. Well, we'll hope the roof stays together for another year, and we'll see what happens next year. So that's sort of what we've been doing. We've been rolling over these projects. We don't have the money. We can't possibly pay for them without exceeding the tax levy cap. So we're stuck pushing them forward. The only opportunity that allows us to address these issues without increasing taxes is the opportunity in which we're looking at now. It's that debt is falling off, and now is our one opportunity to reinvest that debt, to fix the infrastructure things that we've been sort of kicking down the street, waiting for the opportunity where we can do it without increasing taxes. So that's why, and we've been asked the question, it came up at the firehouse the other night, like, why aren't we doing these things as they break, sort of as part of our capital plan? And the answer is in the past we used to, right? Before the tax levy cap was set on schools, if we had to spend an extra $1.5 million to replace the windows one year, we would do it and say, really sorry, the taxes, your rate's going up 4.5% this year, but it's a 1-year deal and then it'll go back down. That's an impossibility for us right now. So that's not an option. So we're stuck waiting for an opportunity like this to come along to be able to address these things. The other answer would be to go out to the community every year and say, well, this year we need windows, it's only going to be $5 a month. And then next year it's roofs, so don't worry, it'll only be $10 a month. And the community's not going to go for that either if we're going out for a bond every single year. So that's why we keep saying this is a unique financial opportunity, because it is an opportunity to address many of those infrastructure needs without impacting our general operating budget. So if it goes down and we miss this opportunity, that money cannot become part of our operating expense. It goes back to the tax rolls, right? This isn't like if we can take the existing debt and make it part of our operating budget and improve our programs and our staffing. That can't happen. It's either we use it for our facilities or it goes back to the community. So if that money goes back to the community, it's about $20 a month for an average household. Now we're in a predicament where the windows still need to be replaced. We can't wait for the next.
And the state aid issue as well,
Right.
unless it's part of a capital project. when it's part of a capital project, we have the opportunity for state aid reimbursement, and if it's not, we don't.
So we could be stuck in a situation where we're like, listen, the windows have to be replaced. We can't wait till the next time debt is dropping off. We can't afford to do them all at once because of our operating budget, so we're going to replace 4 windows a year. And by the time we're done replacing all the windows, the first set will be up for replacement again. Because that's really the only way for us to financially do it without receiving voter approval. And if we do 4 at a time, we get no aid back on them. It's no longer considered a capital project, so that $5+ million we would get back from the state would be gone. We would still spend the same amount of money over the course, we'd probably spend more money over the course amount of time, but we would get no aid back on it. And but other things like expanding the cafeteria, that's not going to fly. Like, that'll never happen without an opportunity like this. There's certain things like infrastructure stuff that we have to do, that we can do, but things like expanding the kitchen in the middle school, we're going to have to deal with. Building a library, we're going to have to deal with without having a library. That's just the reality that we're in. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Why the decision was done to do the vote in December that was added to the ballot in November?
Okay, so there's a couple of reasons. The question was, why was the decision made to vote in December? And why not November? So the first piece about November is you have to picture the complexity of the fact that our school district services multiple towns, in fact, multiple counties. So a ballot in Westchester County, where our Cortland residents live over by the Shell station, it's a totally different ballot than the ballot that Putnam County residents would have to fill out. So the Board of Elections, I won't say can't, but it would be extremely difficult for them to create. So essentially when you walked up to the polling station, which I think was off Westbrook at the community center there for the Cortland residents, you would have to identify whether you were a Putnam Valley School District resident or not, and that's not how it works. They don't have piles of ballots based upon which school district you're in. So we were strongly encouraged to not do it during the general election for that reason, because we split counties. It would be impossible to find out, to make sure the right person got the right ballots without giving the wrong person the wrong ballot. We could end up with someone in Lakeland schools voting on a Putnam Valley school district proposal. The reason why we're doing it in December as opposed to the end of the school year is state had sometimes up to 18 months it takes them to go through the approval process for us to begin construction. For us to take advantage of this opportunity, we have a very small window of time in which this can happen. So what could happen is, if we voted later in the year and we don't get the approvals, if we miss a summer construction season, that could set us back an entire year. Because the majority of the construction needs to be done over the summers, because so much of the work is at the middle school and it's renovations, it's in the existing footprint. It's not new structures, and we can't do major construction in our middle school during the school year where students are there. So the anticipated timeline gives us more time to get state aid approval. We have to go through the bidding process. We have to get all those people lined up with hopes of starting the summer of 2020, which gives us 2 full summer construction seasons before we would anticipate the work being done. So that's the rationale behind the time. Yes?
When you send out bids for construction projects, sorry Dave, it's not like the bus company where you have to pick the lowest bid and then you get screwed in the end?
No, at no time do we have to pick the lowest bid. I mean, the state wants us to pick the lowest bid, obviously, that's why we have the bidding process. But it's like, if there's a reason to believe not to pick the lowest bidder, or you have reasons for not doing that, then that's fine, as long as you can justify it. So it isn't necessarily just based on that.
It's called the lowest responsible
bidder.
And you have to prove, though, that one is not responsible.
Right. I mean, if you can't,
yes,
right? If you can't, and there's no reason, you can't just decide. Well, I'm just going to go with that guy because I know him.
Right.
But that's the process where we would rely heavily on our architects and our construction managers, who do almost exclusively, I think exclusively schools. So they know, they can predict who's going to respond to what bids, and they know who's good and who's not.
We also
and if they have
to other districts to find out, like, if you had experience with this construction company, depending on what it is, and we ask them, for it to be vetted and give us feedback on the services that they receive from them. So we base a lot of decisions on those things as well.
And the odds are, if you're terrible and we have information to eliminate you, those are the people who are going to know that weed before we would. And they would be able to point us to contact Brewster and find out what so-and-so did there, contact Bronxville and find out what so-and-so did there. So they're the people who are in the know that we would certainly rely on their expertise.
There are certain criteria that our contractors have to have, correct?
Yes, very much. It's a huge bid packet that covers everything from prevailing wages to insurance to it's a huge
They're all
task
vetted
just
by
to
the
get that out.
Department of Labor even after they get appointed to the jobs. It's a lot that goes on.
Could I just tag on? You were talking about like the construction timeline and what that does to a vote now or a vote in the spring. But Jill, could you speak to what the financial opportunity would be, let's say, if we wanted to put this project up next year?
So meaning what to the?
Is the financial opportunity the same? Like speak to the financial
Just the
opportunity.
the fact that we
that
would
we have
lose.
now.
Well,
we would no
not
longer be able
next
to
year.
say we do it
Not
as
next
well.
year. Yeah, right. At that point in time, we wouldn't be able to say that we would do it with no increase, because what would happen is the debt would come off of the schedule, and thereby reducing the tax levy to a lower level. And then, of course, there would be a tax increase by adding a new project on, right? Because you would be going, one year you would be going back down, and then you would have to, if you could get it to pass later on, it would go back up. So there would be an increase in the tax levy, and at that point, it would be going over the tax cap, so it may you'd be looking for a supermajority vote on your school district budget, which I don't know would fly in any school district. There are very few school districts across the state who are even considering doing something like that, and most of them are because they have, no fund balance or whatever, and they need to build that back up. But it's unlikely that you would get any of this work done.
Just to follow up on that, and the incentives by the state may not be there if we don't support this initiative. Is that correct?
Well, essentially, like our aid
The aid ratio
is
right now is 59%, correct. So we may not have that same circumstance at that time, that's correct.
Next question.
Can you speak on the facility center? I think a lot of people from what they hear, we have necessities that need to be done, capital improvements, and then you're like, they're saying add-ons. Like,
right.
How come it wasn't like bidded like, this is what's necessary, and then is it just because we're at this point where the bond is coming down and you want to get, upgrade the facilities? And my daughter plays sports here, so I know we're at sports places and everything. But I think a lot of people are feeling that's like not necessary.
Okay. So in full disclosure, and I'll let Brian jump in, you can talk to the specifics of athletics, is the Facilities Planning Committee had this conversation. We spoke about it in depth for a long period of time. And what the committee, we ended up reaching the decision is that space is not a nice to have for us, right? That space is something that we need. And by separating it out and making its own proposition, you're sending a message that says, well, it's not as important as everything else. And that's what the fear was, is that everyone on that committee thought it was as important. And we have really important, really specific needs that we need to address that space does. So I can give sort of a little history of that space and how we ended up there. One, Putnam Valley is in a very unique situation compared to some of our neighboring school districts, the fact that we're a small school district. We're a small district with one elementary, one middle, and one high school. But as a small school district, we offer, in some cases, more sports than those larger school districts offer. So that leaves us in a place where we have cheerleading and wrestling in hallways and in cafeterias, and we simply don't have space. We don't have space to run a physical education program similar to our neighboring districts, and also academic space, which we can get more into. So if you look at some of our neighboring districts, Lakeland, for example, has 5 elementary schools. They have 2 high schools. So when they have practices, they have many gyms to spread their teams out to. We don't have that same luxury. Some schools have dedicated wrestling rooms. We don't have that. Some have dedicated dance studios. We don't have that. Some already have auxiliary gyms. We don't have that. In fact, the Facilities Planning Committee looked at, it was really the first thing we looked at was an auxiliary gym. The problem with the auxiliary gym was it was actually $2 million more expensive for a full-size auxiliary gym. And when we identified all of those needs we had, the decision was made that it was actually less conducive to our needs than what the Health and Wellness Center ultimately would do. So it's a great question, and I know it's a question we've been asked before, is there was a lot of conversation about why and how we ended up in that space. But ultimately the decision was made that it was better served our needs, and it was a need, not a want. It's larger in size and cost less money than what an auxiliary gym would cost. And those were the factors that we debated. We went back and forth, several meetings. And ultimately the decision was made by that committee to make it all for one because we thought that represented what the district's needs were.
Yeah, so if I could just jump in, I tried to put together a short list of just a few examples of what we run into or different scopes of need across the day, not just after school. Because I think that might be one of the concerns is that it might just be an athletic facility. I think even if you thought of it that way, it's still a need, and I'll talk about that a little bit, but I think that there is a need within the day that might not be as apparent to a lot of people, and we are getting that feedback through many of you that is one of the big questions. Well, what exactly does that look like? We've mentioned it a few times, but if you haven't been to that meeting, maybe you're getting, misinformation and things like that. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. So we have the International Dinner. That is a huge event here. It's a community event. It's been growing in scope every single year, and we had it scheduled for Thursday. So what does that do? Well, we don't have wrestling in there. Well, where are they going? Well, the only way it was going to work was that we don't have our modified programs currently running at the moment. So we were going to have wrestling in one of the other hallways, and we were going to be able to make it work. But again, if it was next Monday, wouldn't have happened. Programs would not have practiced. So we're getting pressure from school programs that want to run, that are positive, good programs for other people that aren't in athletics, and we can't run them both at the same time. Okay, so that's one example. We have been trying to put together a scrimmage schedule for girls and boys basketball, for example. Girls, we had them scheduled away at Panis for Thursday. We had early release, wasn't being able to be scheduled. Panis could not do it on Friday. They asked to have it here early. What does that do? That pushes the boys that were all scheduled, 2 teams, from that early slot, change of schedule to the late slot. And it also bounces out JV girls basketball. Now, I was able to move them again over to the middle school because Modified hasn't started yet, but they will be starting Monday. So it is not easy to get all of our programs running at the same time for what they deserve. Okay, and that also would have been that the cheer program that is currently in the middle school at that time, because of the height needed for cheer, they were going to shove over to 1/2 and allow JV girls basketball to practice really to get enough work in to check a practice off. It has to be 45 minutes sport-specific activity in order to get that practice to be a required practice by the Section 1. So, they were accommodating and moving over, so we were doubling up on that space over there. Okay, another example. When girls lacrosse is currently asking for time for preseason, and there isn't any. We have every moment that our teams aren't in the gymnasiums here, Parks and Recreation is in them. Every minute. Every single year there's like a little dance that we do. They try to ask for a little more space. I say, no, you can't do that. And it's usually exactly the same that we use every year. We're bumping into Sunday events with Magma and things of that nature. So every single day of the week, there is an activity in one of our gyms that is important to the community. And it's not just something that's athletic. It's other community entities trying to come in and use it. It's other programs like Magma and things like that that want to use that space because it works the best for that program and for those kids. Okay? So we've currently said, you know, sorry girls across, that there's no time. You can use the turf outside until it snows a lot. That's kind of where we are. The facility, when we talk about preseason training, which is essentially what we're talking about, if you look into the spring, the softball, baseball teams are not able to get into our gymnasium until basketball is completed. Our basketball teams have been doing well. They go on a long run into sectionals. So usually there's only about a week or so before spring sports when softball and baseball can get in there. That's immediately that next Monday after we lose basketball, we put up the batting cage where wires go across the gymnasium, and then it affects the phys ed classes. They can only do certain activities in that gym now, and baseball, softball can go in there, but now you can't do any full court basketball. And there are programs that would like to continue on for that. So you're always just like, okay, and you're done, now we put you here, is kind of what is happening at this point. Whereas if we had this facility, cheer and wrestling would have a home. They would be able to practice there all the time. The faculty meetings wouldn't bump them out of their practice space. The international dinner wouldn't bump them out of their practice space, so on and so forth. They practice in the hall. I encourage you, if you're free, to come by on Monday when Modified starts and walk the halls of the middle school or high school. And you will see people in every single gymnasium space and every single hallway space practicing. Track is trying to run up and down and do their shot put and everything else while we're doing cheer in the hallway. Okay? It is what it is. The PE elective, we want to move into more of an elective-based program with PE. So one of the things that we've been talking about for the last year and a half, Dr. Wills, Dr. Luft, and the rest of the physical education teachers and so on and so forth, health teachers, we have been trying to address the health and wellness of our students. We have a social emotional learning committee that we've started. We have been working on the Yale Ruler program throughout K-12, so on and so forth. And one of the things that we've been looking at is our health program up to speed? Is our phys ed program addressing all of the needs of our students? And they have different wants and desires, different lifetime activities that they would like to get into. And what does that move us towards? That moves us towards an elective, are you okay?
No, I'm just losing time.
Okay.
I know you guys have a board meeting, so
yeah.
It's a Q&A session, so just want to make sure we have enough time.
Sure, thank you. All right, I'll speed it up for you.
So, 10 questions here, just you know.
Well, now you're slowing me down. Hold on. All right, for the phys ed and the curriculum, we talked to the teachers. If there wasn't a concern with staffing as far as having 2 teachers on at that time, could we actually put elective-based material where we have a selection of an activity in this area and a selection of activity in this space, rather than, this is our gymnasium, this is what we're doing this month. And if you talk to your kids, they have different wants and desires, and we would be able to provide that if we had additional space. We also have needs for recess that we cannot fulfill. We've seen that in the high school. We've expanded into the gym and areas that we have for activity, and it is full, and the kids are active, and they're getting that energy out. Anybody that's a parent, which I'm sure you all are, knows they gotta get it out, okay? One snow day on a Friday, and I was ready to rip my hair out at home with 2 kids. Okay, so you know they gotta get that energy out, all right? So, I'll end there.
So a couple of things, just that Dr. Luft will stay here while the board meeting starts, so that people have additional questions, they can be answered. And I just wanted to let you know that. Just a brief statement about health and wellness.
Oh, Frank, could you stand up?
We called it health and wellness because we see it, this facility, as having a much greater reach. It's not simply physical education. It's about the emotional health of our students, having a place where we can do other things. Maybe it's yoga. Maybe it's Tai Chi. other things that our kids can learn to help them with their mental state, which we know now is a serious issue, not just here, it's universal in this nation. We will have like a walking track there where people will be able to walk. Older people, other people, our children. There's a socialization aspect to this that kids desperately need. This is a community that it's not neighborhoods, where kids can walk around to someone's. We need organized spaces for them. By the way, I am hoping that we can make a case to the state about aid for this project based on the way we are framing it. It's also for classroom space. We have academic classes that do hands-on activities that could be done there. And remember, it's all year long, it's an all-weather program, and it's multi-use at the same time. There are several things that can go on there at the same time. It has a lot of the versatility that a gym just doesn't have. And this larger vision for this Health and Wellness Center is something we hope can help us to maximize possibly some aid on this project as well.
I don't remember, was there someone waiting to ask a question?
No, did you have?
I have 10 questions in a row. You want me to ask them all?
Well, so how about we'll give you a pause
One at a time.
after each one, we'll see if anyone else has a question.
Well, first of all, I want to say who I am. I'm Jeff Brown, and I want to say thank you particularly to Dr. Wills, who has been one of the most open-minded superintendents that I could ever imagine. Super responsive,
Didn't pay him to say this.
she deserves a great round of applause for, she's a terrific individual. I don't know how we're going to find a replacement for her, because her breadth and depth of knowledge is unbelievable. I also want to say thank you to the other people that Dr. Wills has put me in touch with regard to this. Dr. Love, Mr. Figueroa, Mr. Spittle. But I want to introduce myself as a person that's not a tax hawk, but someone that looks at things from an investment standpoint. I'm a finance guy myself, so I look at where we're investing positively and where we should be investing, where we're over-investing or under-investing. Okay, so this particular proposed project has a number of those aspects that the community, has questions about, and the community actually doesn't really understand or know. This project has very little information cognizance in the community, right? Many people have no idea about the project, about the vote, or anything else. So I have 10 questions, and actually, I should also say I'm the father of 3 kids in the school district. So I have that interest. And
ask your question.
Right. So the first question is that has been pitched, from the district that there's a zero tax increase for this particular project, right? And that's the tax levy. But I want to, for the public's sake, I know the answer to this question, but for the public's sake, there is a taxpayer cost. Because if the debt rolls off, then the tax levy actually is reduced by the amount of debt. And so based on the number of households, that amounts to about $300 per household. And if we're going to reissue a 10-year bond, that cost is approximately $3,000 per household. Is that correct or not?
It's $240 a year for an average household in Putnam Valley.
For 10 years.
Well, I can't predict what's going to happen.
What's the bond? The issuance of the bond. What is the bond?
14.2.
Okay, so it's 14.2 times 240. Right. So whatever that number is.
No. What are you asking? How many years?
How many years is the bond?
15.
So it's 15 times 240 per year.
I mean, the problem is that money is already part of the taxes. So we're saying it's just no increase in taxes. I'm not hiding from the fact that if we don't do it, there'll be a tax savings. That tax savings is $240
That's the point I'm trying to make.
So it's $3,600 for across 15 years.
Okay, so $3,600 per household. So that's the point that I just want to make for the public that doesn't understand this, that thinks it's free. It's the cost is about $3,600 per average household. That's if you live in an average household. If you live in a household that's assessed at more.
So if I can respond to that, no one said it was free.
but
What we
some
said,
people
no,
think
what we're saying is that there's no change in the tax levy based on the level of debt that we would remain.
I understand that. So if my mortgage ends tomorrow, the savings would, go into my pocket. If I extend the mortgage to pay for my kids' college education for the second mortgage, then I'm not getting that savings, right? So it's the same thing, right? So it's, the basic premise is it's the average household of the 15-year bond is going to cost the average household $3,600.
Okay.
Right? Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, I just want that out there so that everyone understands that. Because some people think from the marketing material that this is free. And it's not free.
But it's not really costing me. When you say it that way, though, you're going to confuse the community because now you're saying it's costing me $3,600, but it's really not costing me anything. And that's already paid. Every month I pay my mortgage or whatever I do. So I don't see it as $3,600 that I'm paying over 15 years.
It depends how you see it.
So
it depends how you see it.
It means people are
So ultimately, over 15 years, you could save $3,600. How much you're paying now. But
Or not. I can see that all of these things need to be done regardless, right?
Right. So that's the other piece of that I don't want people to lose sight of, is if we're forced to replace 5 windows at a time, right? Over the last 10 years, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the tax levy is actually lower now than it was 10 years ago.
Yes.
Which is amazing that any district was able to do that. And I don't take credit because I wasn't here for it. But in this day and age, that's almost an impossibility. But during that time, over $3 million was left on that could have been taxed and still staying below the tax levy cap that the district sort of, for lack of better words, left on the table to save the taxpayers money. If we're forced to change 5 windows at a time, the district will be forced to maximize its tax levy cap to simply maintain our infrastructure needs. So that could quickly eat away at the $240 a year in savings if we're forced to maximize our tax levy cap every year to simply subsidize the cost of major infrastructure.
And also during that time, the high school the bond that we did have on the high school was refinanced at a much lower rate, and the district saved $655,000 in principal and interest from the original issue of the bond because they had that opportunity to do so.
Right,
so this is just talking about money, not about the educational impact on students.
Right. No, but the money is
part
part of the
You're
conversation.
just talking about
I
money.
agree.
Yes, you might save or spend less, but your children wouldn't get the kind of 21st century education that we're.
So here's a follow-on to that question.
Are we still on 1 or are we going on to 2?
On the 2.
All right, hold on. Does anyone else have any
One has
questions?
been answered.
I just promised everyone else a chance. Any questions?
I don't want to monopolize the time.
You're on 2. Go for it.
Question 2. So there's a great benefit in what you have identified in terms of the tax dollar, the debt retirement, et cetera, et cetera. To keep, and I've asked this question before, but I'm not sure I got the answer. To keep the tax level stable so that it doesn't have to go to a super vote for additional funding, is it required that that differential has to be 100% debt for capital improvement, or could it be $500,000 for capital improvement and $500,000 to hire 10 new teachers?
No.
No. It could only be used for for capital improvements. We cannot roll any of that debt that's falling off
into operating budget. It can't be rolled into operating budget.
It would be considered, no.
I do think that's an important point to get out to people because I have heard the criticism like I'd rather see the money going towards teachers, curriculum, things like that, and I think the community needs to understand it's only for.
Cannot make that happen without a supermajority vote to increase the.
Well, what about if it was reissued in debt and then paid to operating budget?
No, you can't.
It's just not how it
Okay,
works.
that's illegal.
Now we're going to get in trouble.
Now we're
All right. Well, let's go to the third question. Encumbrance. So you're maxing out the debt. That's how this whole project was funded. To max the amount of debt and fill it up with whatever project you possibly fill it up with.
We
Well, no.
completely disagree with that statement.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But basically, you took a backward approach. You said this is how much debt is retiring, which means this is how much money we have. So let's fill that amount with products.
No, that's not.
That's not how we did it.
That's
We
not
had
how
a
it
meeting with a committee with a lot of people, and we did a lot of different thinking and a lot of different ideas.
So that's not what
And
happened.
the price tag was a lot higher based on what we really thought the needs were, and we really did diminish it down to what we could afford to
Okay,
do.
well, regardless, you don't have to finish. My question is,
It makes a difference in your statement. It makes a
how much
difference.
is that is an encumbrance upon future projects that we don't even know? Let's say, for example, there's a boom and burst in this county, in this town, and you have, instead of having 120 kids coming into the elementary school, you have 250 coming in. How is the district going to deal with those future things, given that this is 15 years worth of debt?
To answer the question is, if we can't carry it over. Like, we can't just encumber and save it for a rainy day. We already covered it. Can't
that's what
happen,
you're asking.
right? So if we spent 10, we don't get to keep the other 4 for an if case, if then scenario, right? That other 4 would go back to the community, whatever that came out to be for an average homeowner. They would get
Right,
that
you're
money
asking,
back.
can we take the money as the tax levy still and put it in like
How does
fund
the capital
balance or
reserve
something?
fund work? How do you kill that?
It has to come from our general operating
It comes
budget.
from what's left over at the end of the school year from an operating budget. You're not budgeting exactly what what you need. You always have to have more than what you need in a budget. You can't budget exactly.
So you have mid-year retirements, and you had a higher salary figure for those individuals, and now you saved money by hiring new teachers. That money is not earmarked for anything. That money's there at the end of the year. That's the type of money that's used to fund things like the capital.
So there's no way to create a bank account?
No. Where in fact it's limited by the state. The maximum amount of money we can save is capped at 4%, and that's a state law.
So with this, I'm a finance guy, get it. Based on debt, you can only borrow so much, right? So the more debt you take on, the higher interest rate you're going to pay, et cetera, et cetera. So
But again, as a public entity, we're not allowed to. The state caps how much debt we're allowed to have. That's a state calculation. They determine what our, what do they call it?
What our maximum cost allowances can be.
So the point being, we're consuming our borrowing capability with this project.
No.
Correct or not?
No, correct. We're way under what our maximum allowance is.
I'm not saying we're way under. We have a certain amount we can borrow. You just said it, right?
No.
We could borrow a lot more.
We could borrow more and ask taxpayers for money.
We could borrow $30 million.
And if the residents are willing to pay for it.
Our auditors just gave us a report that said we have a very healthy amount of debt. It's extremely healthy. It's not like we have a huge amount of debt for a school district. We have a healthy amount of debt. We're just trying to maintain that low, healthy amount of debt.
So in other words, it's not like we're pre-approved for a $500,000 house and we're spending $501,000 on it. We're approved for a larger amount than we would use, but we're using a lower amount because that's the only number in which we can tell the community that it's not going to increase your taxes. We could have easily, and anyone on the facilities planning committee could have told you, we could have spent $60 million in a heartbeat with things that people at that table determined were needs. Right? And maybe that was within our allowable cap. But then I would have been, this conversation would be around, it's only going to cost you $150 a year. And that was not something we were willing to entertain, which is why we worked backwards to get to the number where we're at, because we thought it was an important message. And if we look at the neighboring communities, it's been an important determination as to what bonds pass and which ones do not, and that the ability to reinvest existing debt and say that we can do all this work without increasing taxes, we determined day one was our essential, we can't go above this point. And then everything we did worked backwards, not up to, but backwards to that point.
Okay, next question. Wait, actually, can I say anything?
Yes, go ahead.
I was on the committee, we started at what we want. So it wasn't what we need. And they did a great job of this. Give us your craziest ideas of what we need for, or you want for the school district. And we did that, and then we said, all right, we put it all on a board, and we said, well, this is ridiculous, this is no good, this is too much. And they did a great job of weeding down from something crazy to something very neat. I understand that, but I actually got a different story about the committee. It started out with like 30 people, ended up with 20. But anyhow, let's move on to the next question.
Wait, someone in the back had a question.
Well, I actually would
would like to get off the financials for a second, because I do feel like the district, with their new FAQs, has put out a lot of information about that. I'd like to talk about some nuts and bolts having to do specifically with the maintenance and the possible health effects of the turf field indoors in the Health and Wellness Center, including concerns about asthma, including concerns about MRSA and staff, and how the district plans to maintain and disinfect these turf fields, since sunlight is in fact the best way to do that. And in an indoor environment, you're not going to be able to do that.
Okay. So I'll do my best and let me know if I don't answer any part of that question. So the first, it's really about the health factors determining turf and affecting health factors associated with turf. And we've looked at research, we've spoken with neighboring school districts. This has been something that's been in the media. It's a well-known issue, and there's very differing opinions, and there's research that contradicts itself. And I think that what I had shared is we're not at the point of determining what type of infill we're going to use. Like crumb rubber is traditionally what is used, and there's some research that says that crumb rubber may not be good for you. There's some research that says that's actually not the case. But there's other districts in the area that have gone with sometimes organic materials like cork. I know I was just speaking with someone over in Rockland County who just put a new field. They have like rubberized sand they're using. So to answer your question, what?
Are those fields indoors?
No, they're not indoors, but there's plenty of indoor turf facilities, right? Colleges have them, communities have them, private entities have them.
Have major staph infections from their turf field, correct?
So I know for a fact that we're actually, because we're an educational institution, we're held to a higher standard. So the architects were talking about the fact for an indoor turf facility, you have to, what's the term, like evacuate so much air every given time, that once you're in a public, in educational, we actually have a higher standard. So we need to actually circulate the air through that even more so than if we were someone running any one of these private things around. We talked about the feasibility of putting in huge garage doors. So when the weather was accommodating, we could open up these huge roll-up doors, and again, we'd circulate air, we'd bring in fresh air, and it would actually be nice to have it open to the open air, so not always feel like this is an enclosed facility. So to answer your question is, we will 100% look at all the research. We will talk to experts in the field, right? I don't claim to be an expert, but I certainly can get in touch with many people who are experts, and the decision we made will be based on the information we have and what's the best interest of the students and what is deemed to be the safest
environment. None of those details have been even close to, that's the next level of detail to even look at the construction of the actual building, how it's going to be heated, how it's going to be ventilated, what infill we're going to use on the turf. That really, we're not at that stage yet. That's next.
And how will that be communicated to the public? As a parent who has a very small child, I keep plastics out of his life entirely. I have a lot of concerns about plastic off-gassing in an enclosed environment and how it will be cleaned. Also, potential latex allergies. How will that be handled for students?
Sure. So when those decisions are made, I certainly would welcome public comments. If the public, there could be experts within the community that deal with this on a daily basis, and I certainly would welcome.
How is that going to be communicated? Because as a parent who doesn't have a child in the district currently, I found out about these meetings on Facebook.
Well,
not from the district.
Everything that we're communicating is put onto the facility's website, and you're now an informed community member, so you know that's where it would be. So all of that information would be posted on that same.
But no notification to the community that information is available. So it's not on me to continually go to the website and look for it.
Well, the only way.
I don't have a child in the district, so how would I know that information is up?
But as a school district, the only way for me to guarantee that every community member gets information every time I have to say, or if they want to send information, is to do a community-wide mailing, which costs taxpayers $1,000 a clip. So I cannot send a community-wide mailer every time a decision is made. All we can do is inform people where the information is, how to get the information. You could sign up, even though you're not a parent. You're more than willing to, able to sign up for our communications. So anything that goes to our parents could go to you as well. So you don't have to.
All of the public board meetings will contain any of the information.
And you can ask questions at board meetings.
Yeah, and you can come, and if you can't come, you can certainly forward questions to the members of the board or the school district administration to get those answers to those questions.
Is the information for signing up for Connect Ed and those things available on the website?
Yes, it is on the website to sign up for electronic
You download the app,
newsletter.
right?
And I just want to mention, if you didn't already say, that the board meetings are live streamed, but they are also replayed on the Putnam Valley Public Access, and the board meeting minutes and videos are also available on the website.
There's the
Public
app.
notices go out about every board meeting via the local newspapers.
We do updates at town board meetings.
Right, town board
Once a month.
meetings.
And the phone app, if you have any structure
There is a
news.
there
on
is a
the
mobile
stream.
app also that people can download.
It's on a signage outside the school.
And the electronic signs outside the buildings do remind the general public of board meetings or any like special meetings.
Yes, sir. What number are we up to?
Number 4.
Okay.
So unfortunately I didn't get to go to the last meeting, but I did watch it online. And over and over again, the issue was about space. And the middle school certainly needs a lot of help. It needs help physically, it needs help academically, it needs a lot of work. Anyone that has had any kids that have gone to all 3 schools, probably pointing to the middle school as that needs the most work. Physically, as has been identified by this project, but also academically. It's also a very tough place for kids to transition, and it's a place where we can make a bigger difference. But anyhow, the point is, and most of the cost in this project is for the middle school, and everyone kept reciting, space is the most important thing, having unique spaces, but this project only includes 4,000 square feet of new space. 4,000 square feet, which is tiny. I mean, it's not increasing the middle school space really at all. It's a tiny amount. Now, I went to a website by the University of California that has the national averages. I don't know if you have these numbers. I'm not expecting to have these numbers, but the average elementary school has 122 square feet per child. The average middle school has 144 square feet per child, and the average high school has 167 square feet per child. So I'm wondering where our middle school, after this addition of 4,000 square feet, will fit in with those national averages.
I can tell you that the committee looked very closely at this, and one of the walls we ran into was cost, right? So of adding to the footprint is the most expensive thing that you could do. So if we looked at actually increasing the footprint by putting space between the 2 schools was a project that was on the table for probably 3 months, and that additional square footage, the additional footprint, blew our budget out. We would have been asking for a tax increase if we had done that. So this was the most cost-effective way, and reconfiguring the space inside the middle school, also adding that 4,000 square feet and the reconfiguration to a much more productive square footage is how we're going to do it.
So my follow-up to that is, where does that stand then with the 4,000 square feet with national averages? Are we getting 144 square feet per middle school student?
We have that. I know we have it. I don't know what the number is on. I have that. But I can quickly answer your question. We need more academic spaces to support our program. We don't need more square footage. Our enrollment is not going up, right? So we don't have an influx of large numbers of kids coming in that are going to affect the number of the square footage feet per student, right? What we have is an increasingly diverse academic program that offers students more and more opportunities, to more and more individualized learning, more ways for them to get the information they need, whether it be E&L, special education, enrichment, whatever those opportunities are, each of those requires a space. When you look at the square footage of that building, we could put hundreds more kids in it without making it any bigger. I could put 30 kids in every classroom, and then that's the type of education they're going to get. That's no longer acceptable to us, nor is it to any other school district around here. So as our educational program gets more and more individualized for students, we require more specialized spaces. I don't need more square footage. I don't have hundreds of extra kids coming in. What I need is, in some cases, smaller classrooms for smaller groups of students, for AIS or for E&L or other things like that. So it's not, if anything, our square footage per student is going down based upon our enrollment, so there's no need for us to add additional square footage.
So how does it manage the construction?
that tends to contradict what was in the last meeting, where people were saying we need more space.
We need space.
4,000 square feet.
We need spaces like classrooms. And the project includes the addition of 2 new classrooms, plus larger spaces for cultural arts. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The project through the school, like how are they going to be doing the construction if this is approved when you have kids in the school? It's going through the
That
school.
goes back to the timeline.
Yeah, we spoke about it early. The majority of the construction in our anticipated timeline, right, is obviously contingent upon the first piece of that being getting public approval, is that a majority of that work would happen over 2 summers. So the summer of 2020, the summer of 2021, and that's part of the reason why we're going out for a December vote, because we want to maximize our ability to have 2 full summer construction cycles, because we cannot do major construction while students are in school.
We can do the health and wellness center, and we can do the work that's in that additional footprint that's inside the courtyard area. And while school is in session, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be on me to deal with that. But then during the summers is when we have to, we get ready and we go hard as soon as the schools are out, and the architects have looked at it. We need 2 full summers to get all that interior work done in the middle school and the work in the elementary schools.
So if we fall off that timeline, it actually delays us an entire year, to answer your question. If we fall off that anticipated timeline, we cannot all of a sudden catch up over the winter. We would then be forced to extend to a 3rd summer of the construction cycle.
We don't have extra space to put kids to teach them here.
It would be impossible.
So during that construction period, is there going to be no implication on the children in the middle school?
Well, we're going to minimize any interruption.
There's already not enough space, right? So
it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be, it'll be a daunting task, I'll tell you.
So the kids, as I figured, the kids grades 2 through 6 today are going to have a difficult time during this construction process.
I didn't say that.
Well, are they going to have an equal amount of space that they have today, which is already tight, which is why we're doing this whole project?
Yeah.
Where are they going to go once the cafeteria gets ripped up and the
every effort's going to be made so those things don't happen during the year. We may have to utilize the high school cafeteria. We might have to utilize other space, but we're not going to not feed the kids lunch because something's going on.
Yeah, so it's not going to be a great period during this construction process.
There may be no interruption to students. We don't have that answer.
In any construction project, if need be, they create some kind of swing space to accommodate kids in another room. But I mean, there isn't any talk that that's even going to happen. We're saying, we're not going to say to you that it's going to be perfect, because we don't know that at this given moment.
I'm going to do my damnedest to have as little impact on the children as possible. That's what I do, and I'm going to work like crazy to do it. But if something happens out of my control, we're going to have to say, Jeremy, we need to do something, because this is going to be 2 weeks without this space or something.
Right. At the end of the day, there's people who do this for a living. And that's what we're going to work with. There'll be educators and people who do this for a living, and they'll decide on the phasing and what's going to happen when. And from the educator's standpoint, the educators sit at that table. Every decision will be based upon what's in the best interest of our instructional program.
I'm wondering if Joe remembers if there was any situation like that when the elementary school went through their major renovation.
No, we didn't have any. I know that some schools will do trail, like we have a modular building that you could put up to have students go into. I mean, those are all possibilities. They do it in other school districts, but we haven't had to do it. No.
Anybody else?
No more Jeffrey.
I got the most relevant questions on my list here.
I put a motion on the floor that we have no more further questions.
So this question is for you, Dr. Locke, because you kind of put yourself in this position. In one of your PowerPoints, you made the link between quality schools and real estate value.
Yes.
And I think everybody in this room that lives here and pays taxes, and also has kids in school, those are your 2 greatest investments, your children and your house. And so quality of education, when I think of the term quality of education. I think of places that are incredible school districts. I think of Scarsdale, Chappaqua, Rye, Jericho, Syosset, Bronx, whatever.
Too much preamble.
And the point is that I've never seen a study or anything where the quality of the school district is measured on the cafeteria or having an indoor turf. In fact, none of those school districts that I just mentioned have an indoor turf. So my question is, since you have created brought this about, this question is for you. Do you see a direct discernible impact on the quality, as I define it, of the school district?
All right. So, yes, the first piece, and then I know Johnson in the back has something to say.
No, I just wanted, when you said it's not on a cafeteria and a gym, like I teach children in a hallway. The music department teaches in a hallway. It's about academic programs that are forced to be in a hallway because we don't have space and we're constantly interrupted. And we don't have good educational experience because we don't have the space. So I hate to hear that people are thinking of this as a cafeteria and a gym, because it's so much more than that. And it matters to every child and so many teachers to have that space. And I come to work every day and I teach kids in the hallway. And that's not for those kids.
Right. So the study called, made the link between home values and desirable school districts. And you could have your personal opinion, and in your pecking order, I know where we rank, but there is plenty of people in this room, in this school district, many people who graduated here that wouldn't give up their education in Putnam Valley to go to Chappaqua, Rye Neck, Scarsdale, or anywhere else. So you can compare them to that, and I can show you places where we've outperformed some of those, whether it be in the cultural arts, whether it be in athletics, whether it be in academics. So there are plenty of people, myself included, who went to this school district who are extremely proud of everything we do. And I think it is a desirable school district. I think it's an excellent school district. And I think this will make it even better. And it'll make it more desirable. And I think that momentum will continue to grow. We've made tremendous gains over the last couple of years in terms of test scores and everything else, because that's what people like to measure us by. But that's only one little piece of everything that happens here on a daily basis. So the test scores we have control over, and our test scores are skyrocketing. And they will continue to do so, but that's one little measure of this school district. So yes, I think it is a desirable school district. I wouldn't let my kid leave here or other districts to go to any of the ones you mentioned. So I hope that answers. Yes?
Can I just also comment as well? I think the piece that a lot of people don't see with this is a library for the middle school. So I've been in the middle school for 15 years, and it was decided 12 years ago that we would transition away from a library model. And eventually those books went away, and now we have an active learning space with the advent of technology and the one-to-one laptop program. But in reflecting on those choices that were made within the district, there's nothing that really replaces a space that kids can go to work with a media specialist, or to have their books out, have research done, that really this project will add to the middle school in that flexible space where it's currently a courtyard. I mean, that room, if you look at the engineer's plans, is vital toward the education of all the students, all 520 students at the middle school. And I think that's another piece of the project that we're overlooking a bit. We say, you know, we share the campus with the high school. We have a beautiful library here at the high school. Yes, but we also have 600 students here at the high school who are using that space every period of the day. So I think bringing back the library is such a key component that we are really thirsty for, and we think that all of our students truly can value and need.
Okay.
No more questions.
Oh, good. I'll stay until you answer the questions. That's cool. Committed. Hold on. Go ahead.
Back to the health and wellness center. Storage. You talked about using for wrestling, gymnastics. So obviously they need mats.
Yeah.
Is there storage included with that to get the mats off the
Yeah.
Lots of conversations about storage.
Yeah, I know more about storage than we thought I would. So we have a serious storage problem. In fact, in some cases, our cheerleaders and wrestlers themselves are responsible for moving large, heavy mats just for the right to practice in a hallway or a cafeteria, upstairs in some cases. So this space would have dedicated storage space for the mats, which would get them out of our hallways, out of our cafeterias, out from underneath stairwells, and have them somewhere where they could easily be set up and taken down and packed back up. I don't know, maybe Brian can speak to, I don't know how much of their short practice time is spent setting up and cleaning up the mats, but it's certainly not something that any other sport has to do.
And I asked the architects because I fight against the lack of storage on a daily basis here, and about storage as part of this project. I wanted a warehouse in addition, you know, but you don't get any aid on that.
To add on
and
storage
it has
to
to be
that
SED
building,
approved
there was-
building that would cost an extraordinary amount per square foot.
To add storage onto that building though was extremely expensive. So we're trying to figure out other ways to store
Storing within that
within
structure.
the space.
So really, you picture like it caged in, like we don't need high security, or is it going to be cinder block with a padlocked door? We just need a dedicated space for it. So even if we cage in a couple feet of the outside and allow the track to, I mean, without infringing on the track, that would give us a dedicated storage space for those mats that could easily move in and out without having to be carried up and down the stairs.
Right, and it's, if anybody knows who the woman was over there, I would like to get her contact information to make sure that we maintain that back and forth as the project goes on. But one of the things that it just reminds me of is when we roll those mats out, it's not just getting them into the cafeteria, but every single day they have to be mopped down and cleaned. I was very conscious of avoiding some of the things that were talked about as far as infection and so on and so forth. We pay attention to it very closely, so it will definitely cut down on that time of moving and then cleaning. It will just be rolling them out, taping them and cleaning.
Got
it. So this is a big project, obviously. One of the concerns of mine and many people in the community is we have a very thin administration here. It operates, I think, pretty efficiently. How much time would you say of the administration is being devoted to this capital project? Because obviously every hour that's spent on that is an hour less spent on focusing on academics or college preparedness, et cetera, et cetera.
So my answer is lots. Lots of late nights, lots of weekends, lots of other non-compensated time. I'm certainly not getting paid to be at any of these evening events. 3 of us spent hours with you by yourself one evening, right? All of us off the clock, none of us collecting a penny of that time. So my wife could certainly probably better answer that question. My 2 kids that I never see can answer that question. But I believe enough in this project to dedicate my time to doing this. And I'm hoping after the December 4th passes that I get to reacquaint myself with my family.
I guess I probably asked the wrong question. The question is, I realize that. I guess the question is this negatively impacting what the core focus of parents in the community is, and that is academics and quality of the school system?
No. Nobody in the school system will say that I or any of my colleagues are not doing their job because of this facilities project. Absolutely not.
I can vouch for that. I talk to Dave like once a week.
Too bad it wasn't something happened.
Yeah, missed your call this week.
You know, Dr. Luft, I can also comment on that. It's actually given administration another way to look at opportunities. So you look at space differently now, and you look at the educational needs that we have, and you say, okay, we might need a flexible, smaller space for AIS or Wilson instruction. And when you're in the middle school and you have lots of large spaces and then maybe a couple of smaller rooms, this is exciting. It actually, you get to design it in a way that meets the needs of the programs that currently exist, or to think about future programs such as robotics, which Mr. Brown, I know you and I have talked about several times. This is an exciting opportunity to say, hey, we want to bring in these certain programs, and this is a great space for that, and this is how we can utilize it. So it's really more of an exciting aspect of what could the future hold for our students coming through.
Any questions? Got more?
I have one more.
Down to the last one.
No, no, it is, but you said this, the test scores are skyrocketing. Could you email me that information? Because no one in this town seems to realize that.
It's on the agenda for our next board meeting.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. And email it to the real estate agents too.
We already met with them and talked about it.
That may improve some people's home values.
We had a meeting with all the area real estate agents and actually talked about that data and shared a lot of that data with them.
That seems to be elusive to potential home buyers and family.
If you look at the metric that everyone bases this on is that greatschools.org that's connected to Zillow, and people are never happy with this score. If you go down one level beyond what the overall score is and you get to test scores, which is really what we're talking about, our buildings are 7, 7, 8 out of 10 in terms of test scores. And that's last year's data, and this year, 2 years ago, that data is 2 years old. So when next year's data is uploaded, whenever greatschools.org gets around to it, our scores will go even higher. And those are test scores based upon state testing. Yes?
So that's the agency, whatever that you use, is great.
We don't use them. They're attached to Zillow.
US News, they have, ratings for schools.
Yeah.
Put Valley's rated awful on that one.
Right. US, I think that one's...
I'm just saying.
It is.
That one's big. You have to be careful. Some of these are like
That's why I'm
paid
asking the
for
question.
subscriptions, like they want you to pay to be part of their service.
Well,
some of them are like community-based surveys that you have to agree to survey all of your students. So there's a lot of misnomers around some of those rankings that people put way too much credit into. Greatschools.org is the one that I know because they have a link directly to Zillow. So if you pull up any house in Putnam Valley, it'll give you like a rating for the school districts. And ours are 6s. I think across the board, I think all 3 are currently 6s out of 10. But there's a lot of things that we take hits for that are really outside of our control in terms of diversity, socioeconomic status, absenteeism. All of those metrics are things that they consider that not without of our control, but in some cases, very little we can do to impact those things. Test scores is obviously something that we have a drastic control over, and those test score numbers are way higher than our overall ranking numbers are. So I agree, it's always disheartening when those things come out. But when you look at what you have to do to be part of that, like I'm not taking instructional time out of my high school students' day to give them a survey that's going to be used for commercial purposes by USA Today or whatever the heck issues it, just so we look good. Like that's not something, I'm not sacrificing instructional time to have students complete surveys for a commercial entity. Any other questions? Okay. All right. As always, I know we have a couple weeks. We are always available. We do house calls now. We went to the firehouse. We went to, we have a senior center meeting coming up. We've done the town board meetings. We're more than willing to meet with anyone, anytime.
I'm happy to give tours too. I've given some.
Even right now, if someone wants to do a tour.
Yeah, I'm ready.
I have to go to a board meeting I'm an hour late for.
You ready?
Is anybody interested in a tour of the middle school? Because I'm throwing Mr.
You can see some of the greatness firsthand. It's been years. Oh yeah, so check out that. All right. Thank you. I encourage anyone who hasn't been in there in many years, go for the quick tour.
Thank you. And thank you for the questions, everybody.
Yeah, thank you all very much.